Thank you. Thanks for joining. So let's get started. So we have the context over here. It's a B2B session. B2B session. To be specific to your company. Let's say my batch students, and we're going to talk a lot about what we do, what SAP is doing on SAP Joule, experience across while the implementation is happening, how is the change impacting, let's say TCS or an emphasis with implementing an SAP success factor, or let's say SAP to speaker voice to how is Joule impacting it, the actual end user using it. The thing is that my laptop will die. What is exactly
much it even no, this is OBS will stream at one platform. I cracked the OBS, I started streaming in 5 to 6 OBS. Whatever we speak, it should be kept.
So what is AI scope in a billions landscape at that scale, powering millions of communication, something that is taking lot of people over there, and then subsequently motive, which is managing such intense amount of needs, such critical supply chain optimizations reach there, the single delay happening, and so much how you handle that scale, it is AI plays a critical role, or your question is more on whether it's purely AI or ML? Because you have a lot of wait time optimization models, you have a bunch of like models for fraudulent prevention and all those things. So we want to learn how so it's not with the SAP guys. And also want you to touch a bit on this SAP's latest which at the board that we will not release our SAPs to LLMs. Definitely wanted to address that also. But why do you want to keep the ecosystem so constrained when you have, and I always take this as a landmark decision taken by SAP. Is this decision something similar to what Kodak did sometime earlier, or there is a lot of, definitely want to know more about that. Yeah, sure.
A lot of things that we brought about the entire AI strategy of execution. But when we start with the last point that we said, hopefully we are not going to go back and the knee or the board. Lastly, SAP has been in the domain of being a system of records, known for you have all of your records of your entire supply chain, manufacturing, and whatnot. So, what we are moving into fundamentally now, of course, this is also driven by the market, this is also driven by the customers' asks. We are more or less moving into a fundamentally being an AI company. It is not building AI into your products, it is actually having AI across your entire product. And that is this kind of work that we are doing. You already mentioned some of them to Joule. Joule is a co-pilot, but something which is kind of sitting as a layer in between the entire portfolio. This is an evolving layer that we have today, where all entities are building their own skills, capabilities into that, so that for an end user, the utopian idea fundamentally is if you are a manufacturing sales assistant, you just get a UI where you can directly go and key in what you want. Like you've received a tender, or I would like to know what is the status of my supplier. You don't have any applications. And that is the utopian sort of ideology. Keeping that in mind, the AI as a fabric is being inculcated in all of the layers. We have started this journey. Have we finished? There's still quite a long way to go, and anything and everything that we are doing moving forward will have this as a primary entity, and that would be first thing. With regards to the products in itself, apart from Joule being a centralized place for co-pilots, one of the additional announcements that SAP also did is we are more or less now looking into the autonomous AI robots. And thankfully, I'm also part of the entire journey which started. Is if you look at the AI journey, we start with some sort of AI-led assistance, then which moves into your AI-led sort of an act, right? And that is what the autonomous is, where you can kind of act on behalf of the human. And these are end-to-end sort of a value chain that we are bringing for the customers under the autonomous domain. We have started with a couple of them, really large value chains. There will be a lot more that will be added. So that is another aspect of AI, where there will be a lot of agents, agent communication across the world. So that is the second aspect or arm of AI.
Yeah, so this decision that SAP not allowing MCPs, let's say, so just to give a context for all the folks, nowadays you can place an order on ChatGPT for your Swiggy, right? That is what your ChatGPT is able to access the MCP of Swiggy and you can place an order. So a very debated discussion happened on LinkedIn and entire world followed when SAP recently released that they won't be allowing MCP. What's your take on that?
I'll give you two perspectives, right? I'll give you an insider perspective. As an insider's perspective, one of the core things that we have as is right? And the decision
அது மட்டும் பார்த்துக்கோ, அந்த எள்ளு பூவை பார்த்துக்கோ.
it is not your model, you can use quads or interlopers or whatnot, right? That is not what really matters. These are all commoditized entities. But the core value is what we need to safeguard because that is our oil, period. And that is exactly what we have safeguarded. From a local or my own personal opinion, I think it's we saw the advent of AI somewhere around early last year itself. Our partners building a lot of capabilities using the data that is there underlying, and our own solutions were not getting pushed into, right? So, yes, there are different perspectives where you can look into it, but from an internal standpoint, our strategy we have a whole, holding on to what is the most important thing, which is data. I think that is what the move is. Now, the repercussions, this repercussion is everywhere. I even saw memes and reels on Instagram, right? So, these repercussions actually have a larger impact, not only for the SIs, not just your Accenture and Infosys of the world, but even the lot of other partners which really depend on this. So, maybe there is different ways that this entire thing will be looked into. All I can say is probably wait and watch the space in the next 3 months.
Exactly. So I think in our class we have debated this a lot, and models are becoming commoditized. There are these slopes coming in LinkedIn that in the last 6 months, the amount of models that is getting generated is probably 100 times than that had been generated in 2022. That is exactly what Deepak sir was trying to say. So I hope you all understood. The moat is in the data, the business processes, what SAP has developed over 30, 40 years in terms of building ERP systems across the pipelines, be it CRM, sales, HRMS, of the world. They were building an AI layer on top of that. The model is immaterial rather than depending on and so on the first point, we all are very interested considering the penetration of SAP in the Fortune 500 space and all. Well, fundamentally, I want to know, my entire batch would want to know, and all of us have invested a lot of time in this industry. You can see the usual experience of Amazon shopping, where you can have a contextual search. Let's say Deepak and we are going for a trek this weekend, we don't know what to buy, please I can use it. So we kind of right over there, two of us going to Nandi Hills for a trek, what to buy, and the contextual search will tell us 100 things. So, but in terms of the adoption of contextual search, it has not given the kind of very encouraging results in the top 10 market for Amazon. So, what is that appetite and customer signals you guys are seeing at an enterprise scale when you're focusing and investing so heavily on June? Like, are the customers, this debate which is going on, chat versus click, this experience of going through the features, clicking on it and discovering that old thing is still there, or people are navigating towards the conversation experience of the mobile experience?
Let me start from a totally different angle. The answer to this question depends on who you speak to. If you speak to a CIO of a company, they require open. If you speak to the end user who is actually using your solution, they don't give a damn. They don't want to use AI. Why? Fundamentally, their entire work is jeopardized. They don't want to use it. And also, more importantly, the trust level of AI is still not there, at least at an output. Let me verify. Now, the moment you do that, the whole existence or the relevance of AI is useless. Absolutely useless. So, coming back, if we say how we kind of navigate this more or less from an SAP or a customer based perspective, right? So Joule is not just a copilot sort of an experience that we want to bring in. Joule is also an experience where you can directly interact with your business objects, which is your prima facie day-to-day job, right? Whatever you do day in and day out. So we want to kind of have that so that in a natural language, you can fundamentally process how you actually go about your work without the existence of any applications or tools. Like I mentioned in the first part, the utopian ideology is you ideally don't have to do anything. You can just click the record button and say, hey, where is my order that was supposed to come from ABC supplier? You get to know, okay, it has reached so and so. This was the last gate pass issued or things like that. You will get to know your entire order scheme. That is where we want to get to, and that is what Joel is trying to build. And we, from a parent leadership perspective, I would say we are on. So when you look at our individual LOB or vertical penetration, it is a hit and miss. But something which is also we see which is improving. But when we are looking at it more from an end to end, because we are building it as a fabric, like I said, another important thing having AI work through the entire business process. While we are doing that, this is not being a part of the process itself. So you immediately kind of bring two agents together, Joule, where the communication happens and the data exchange happens, which helps you in your business process. So that is what we are kind of going into in the so-called autonomous domain procurement. So hopefully, it was not too jargonized there, but yeah, if I have to kind of summarize it, the co-pilot experience is something which we are trying to enrich with business object details for SAP users. And that is something which we will also further enhance when we look at the autonomous, the end-to-end sort of solutioning that we are doing. All of this.
Good. Thanks, sir. Thanks, sir. Now, from enterprise business, I move to the ML part. Then I'll come to the telecommunication space. Yeah. So I want to understand, sir, the scale of motive, like across geographies when you're optimizing this fleet management part, the supply chain parts, and the processes are very different. Vendors are very different. Recently, I was talking with a leader from eBay's supply chain team, and I was having a discussion. They were building they're building a team in India of AI and ML in supply chain fulfillment. So even at eBay scale, 10 million ARR kind of a scale, they don't have ML introduced in their entire fulfillment flows as of now, because the fulfillment flows across nations, across geographies are scattered. Different vendors, different APIs, different data points, etc. And hence they cannot have one size fit all kind of an ML logic which works everywhere, because the feature engineering cannot be built around that. So how do you kind of take these questions, handle these questions at your level with Motive? How do you go about it in Motive? Yeah, a little bit about Motive, the kind of industries that we serve, the kind of products we offer. Then I'd love to touch upon maybe some of the problem statements that we often come across, and how we are using AI very effectively to kind of do something very, very different in this space. So for the benefit of everyone, Motive is a company that we started about 13, 14 years back in the US. We build hardware and software products for helping the businesses in the physical economy do their safety, productivity, and profitability better. So when we talk about physical economy, we are talking about businesses such as oil and gas, construction, agriculture, transportation, field services, and others. These are kind of industries that you would not associate with cutting edge or cutting edge technology at all, right? If you are someone who is running a car, I don't think you will be the first person to think about what's the next thing that you will use. What changed a few years back is there was a regulatory landscape change that mandated that all of these different industries had to deploy a vehicle tracking device on their trucks and all on their commercial vehicles. And Motor was the first ones to be able to deploy them. So we ended up piggyback on the regulatory change. And Motor was the first ones to have close to 20% market share in the US market. 20% of the trucks in the US market are having our hardware device sitting on it. And that's sending us telematics data every few seconds. This is probably the first time ever in the transportation space that someone was having access to real-time telematics data at the scale that we did. And that made it very, very interesting for us to kind of build products that would change how the industry operates. So now coming to what Motive does, right? There are like three key levels that we try to improve: driver safety, productivity, and profitability. In the US. Today, trucking is the most common job in 34 states out of 49 in the US. Out of 50 states, 34 is trucking is the most common job. And safety is a very critical aspect of how these trucks operate. A single truck accident and resulting in a death can be nuclear verdict for the company. Lawsuits in the US were huge, companies would shut down and they would have nothing to kind of go back to.
So we operated on, hey, how can we, the North Star for us is, how do we reduce number of accidents to zero, and what can we do to build around? So we built our own proprietary dashcams that record driver behavior as well as roadside behavior in terms of what we can do to reduce the number of accidents. So our dashcams not just take recording of what's happening on the road, the driver behavior, but we build AI models on the edge that can help with identifying is the driver distracted when he's driving, is he looking to his phone while driving, is he kind of yawning, is he stretching his hands, is he looking drowsy. All of these different attributes, along with how quickly the vehicle is swerving different lanes and whatnot, are data points that our dashcam is capturing along with our vehicle gateway. Our vehicle gateway is also capturing data on telematics. How often is this guy hard braking? Is he accelerating frequently? Is he taking too many sharp turns? So the combination of these data points from telematics and the dashcams allows us to build cutting-edge AI technology on the edge, and that's helped us reduce the number of accidents on the road significantly. Right? So I think that's one aspect of AI that we are using very, very effectively on the driver safety side. Now coming to the supply chain side of things, we operate with customers that are more than 20,000 vehicles in their fleet. So for these folks, it's super important to your point that the products that are supposed to be delivered from one place to the other are delivered on time. Now the companies that take on products are taking as simple products as just wood, furniture, chairs and whatnot. But then there are some products which are extremely perishable. So seafood, agricultural produce that needs to reach a particular destination on time. And then there are luxury products like cars and vehicles that are being transported as well. Trucking is a very large space. So how important is it for a particular piece to reach the destination on time in a safe way without getting stolen is extremely important. Imagine having a truck filled with 10 Porsches or Lamborghinis being driven from New York to Atlanta, and there is no guarantee that it's going to reach Atlanta on time. Now, if I send you this truck in the morning, and because of whatever reason, this truck is not going to reach at 6 o'clock in Atlanta when the yard shop shuts, then there is a meaningful risk associated with these vehicles getting stolen. So how do you ensure that you are using AI effectively to make sure that the vehicles are reaching on time? This is where we use routing data, driver behavior, fueling information, compliance. There's a certain number of hours a particular driver can drive without taking a break. So how do you combine all of these different data attributes effectively to be able to reach a particular destination on time to safeguard the measures and whatnot? So there's like a bunch of different data that you on both sides. I'll stop there. There's like a bunch of different
Fair point. So, while studying AI level in our classes, we typically understand this triangle of trade-off, that is between accuracy, latency, and cost. Let's say on your point of driver safety, when you told whether he's running or his attention is not on the like on the road or something. Those are certain attributes you kind of proactively the features you are considering it, giving it to an ML model and immediately sending a notification that dude, you're not doing it right, do it right, or else there is a possibility of accident or something. And that is in a way you are kind of reducing accidents and all. So while at your scale of motive, billions of dollars at stake, revenue of billions, how do you kind of focus on this triangle of uncertainty when you are building this ML models? How do you kind of look into it? What is your perception on that for us? Can you give us an idea on that?
That's a great question. One of the very interesting things about doing AI in the physical economy is you are not using AI to write a draft email. When AI goes wrong, I can quickly correct my email again and send it back. Here we are talking about writing that feature.
Yeah, it's like that WWE ad. Yes, it's entertainment, but the consequences are real.
That's true. So there is an aspect of the AI being super accurate. There is also an aspect about the physical economy that is not a so these truck drivers are driving in icy conditions, snowy conditions, roads are broken, they are driving in situations where there is no cellular network. The moment you are talking about no cellular network, the whole concept of AI, hence the desire for us to be able to do these things on the edge is extremely important. There is an aspect of latency, but then there is an aspect of there is no concept of data reaching the server and coming back. So how do we effectively do that is something that we keep in mind extremely important. Right? So there is an aspect of we have an edge device It's going to have certain amount of memory, certain amount of compute. It cannot rely on data reaching the server and coming back. Latency is a real deal. If I have a deer crossing the road and I've got literally 3 seconds to take it back, there is no way this data is going to be computed by the dashcam, process, send, and come back. And that's where edge AI becomes super critical. We have, again, as I said, we have access to and the point, data is the node. The more data you have, the better enriched your models are. And then you are able to kind of build something really creative and unique. I think that's where it comes down to. We have access to a lot of data. We process it, we have human annotation to make sure that the AI models are extremely accurate, and then we deploy those. And when we deploy those, we then do the whole journey. It's not just about detecting, it's also about proactively telling the driver, hey, you need to stop. There is something coming up, apply brakes. We are taking it one step forward, but this is something that we have to be very careful. Can we actually immobilize the engine in some of these situations? Take it one step forward. Again, this requires a lot of collaboration with OEMs and whatnot. But like again, to your point, we have to keep in mind the physical state, the accuracy, the latency, the access to data, and how accurate our AI models are. We'd rather not deploy a model that is half accurate than deploy something just for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So lovely points. You see these points of feature engineering proxy, the example which he gave, where there is no cellular network, but even then the model have to operate. So for feature engineer X, a data attribute is taken into consideration because at that point of time, the ETAs cannot be predicted or the movement cannot be predicted by the GPS thing because there is no network. So very sophisticated ML models built on top of that. Now, from the supply chain and rider segment, I want to get into the enterprise credit segment of beauty. So, that's again a lovely segment on our. Thank you. Now, this enterprise credit segment itself comes with its own set of caveats. And who knows it better than that? We have India, we have everyone in a lot of the country with so much enterprise credit at stake. So how is Ruby kind of investing into this ML models into understanding fraud? So there is this big domain of there is this thing called Salesforce Financial Services Cloud, which invests a lot into covenant management, understanding proactively if a loan kind of gets into an FPA or a non-performing asset at an enterprise scale, thousands of crores at scale. So what is this investment? Is this and also want to understand fundamentally, like in fintech, enterprise credit, is fraud detection is the only place where a lot of investment happens into AI and ML, or what are the other segments also where there's a bunch of investment happen because certain domains are pretty straightforward, we understand it the piece of it. Okay, these are the places where AI or ML could actually get into. But your case is slightly more very domain centric. Can you explain us what are the segments and specifically deep dive on the fraud detection and all those aspects, considering the country has seen so many frauds and all, why those couldn't be predicted earlier in terms of when you have such sophisticated algorithms in place?
Multiple business lines. The entire business is all about can we unlock capital by looking at documents. Unlike retail loans, where the documents are fairly standard, so like payslip, IT returns, and so on. In business loans, every business comes submits documents in some formats. Depending on who is the approving partner managing the process. The challenge of delay, somebody would call it as a data, somebody would call it as operating profit. So they are not. So they are not actually, if you are doing simple extracts, it won't work. So now with transformers and vector search, they can actually semantically match and try and figure out. So apart from fraud, so after the advent of relevance, unstructured documents are where there's a lot of application. But of course, it's not straight through processing because here the accuracy has to be 100%. So if the model identifies this as a name, and if it happens in the unit space, the loss is just 2. If it happens in the pro or the units are crossed, then the impact is massive. So unit loop is a standard as of today. So nowhere is getting deployed. Even if the bank wants to do it, there's a regulator who doesn't allow security and auditability. And the other aspect is the credit risk prediction, right? So we have credit scoring, credit rating. So and depending on the type of borrower, so if it is a small and medium businesses, then they are inside customers. Right? So they don't have a lot of profit. That is one side of the problem. When you look at alternative data and have alternative credit models built on this proxy credit models. And on the other hand, we are talking about NPAs, most of the NPAs happening or regular in the news, very large. So here the problem is finding data in haystack. So there are a lot of documents. So is it easiest way to sort of body problematic data is submit hundreds of documents. So here again AI can be used because most of the documents are unstructured and becoming it's not standard for becoming multiple variations for now. It's a profit and loss and balance sheet. Companies will documents would look very different compared to companies. And there are various creative accounting practices that can be used to sort of query the data. So a lot of ML plus earlier we used to use CP and ML. Now we can actually use ML models to sort of do the document understanding rather than doing the OCR and then ML as a two-step process. And fraud analytics is of course the bread and butter in the lending space. It can happen across stages, so it can be at the time of credit application, all the documents that are submitted is the document first. So there are multiple ways to do it to apply some CPP algorithms to see whether the document has been edited, looking for hard actuals, that can be detected if the document has been edited. And the other way to do it is there are certain there's something called a benchmark where the first digit of any naturally occurring numbers follows the normal distribution. So we look at all the data submitted and we see whether it is what is the is it matching that natural correlation or is there a huge deviation? In which case we get one of the signals. And most of the models are mostly answerable, right? So you run multiple models, and then if all the models fire that it's a fraud, then probably it is. Right? So you can't shoot every bit all the time. So you can shoot some people all the time or all the people some of the time. So taking multiple data points, applying multiple models and crossing them is the way to do it.
So this last point talks about something we look doing. It's something called confusion matrix. So when you have the actual results and the expected results, and you create a matrix around that, what we kind of theoretically said, that is what Sir is trying to say in enterprise credit management fraud analytics domain. How do they kind of do an ensemble of models and kind of identify from there if at all a business is having signals around fraud, and again you have to try to find the confidence score around it. Across a bunch of models, what is the confidence score? Do not rely on just one model because it can be saying a client that is potentially frauding but it is not. So that's again an embarrassment for business people who want to be managed. Thanks a lot. Finally, we'll come to the telecommunication space. Yeah. Video, as we all know, powers billions of these communication APIs, most of the SMSs that you receive, marketing SMSs, transactional SMSs, it might be any marketing automation tool or ONPage on top or any LSU on top or Leadsquare or a Salesforce SFMC on top. But underneath the hood, you have a bunch of telecommunication API providers powering it. And Twilio is that company present across most of the geographies powering it. So, what is like? This is a very seems like a very ops heavy, infra heavy kind of domain. So where is this where is AI scope in it? Like is it something around sending time optimization where you kind of do that? If at all I want to send an SMS to Deepak, this is the time of the day he has a very high probability to open that SMS. Or something like on an email or something. So what are this exactly the segments where AI is kind of you invest into AI in video, and also specifically certain segments can you walk us through, and whether it is ML heavy or AI heavy, can you take us through that?
So, next question. So, is it getting them? Right. So looking at customers who are B2C and well B2B, like you mentioned over there. So B2B customers are using video to build a platform which is providing some value to customers and using video for recommendation work. And then we have our enterprises who are using where we have been using here. It's almost the entire stack. Very well stated. So and I can take it into two parts, the ML interface presently. So I myself have been leading the fraud prevention portfolio, and I have been using ML for the last 4 years, even before the GDPR. And ML works better for us because think of an example, you are trying to send a message to somebody, let's say OTP or verification. You have very limited time. You don't want to keep analyzing whether the message that was requested whether fraud or not, or if the message content is something that is prohibited in that country or not. Like there are many countries where you cannot send a message related to gambling or alcohol selling. So how do you look at what is the country that the message is going to, what are the regulations, and is the message compliant or not, or is the message that you're trying to send to, is it a fraud or not?
Excellent use.
Yeah, and that happens within milliseconds.
And what are exactly the corrective actions you guys take when you identify that it loss you block it?
That is better to stop the messages from reaching out because it is not just so there are two aspects. One, where the fraudster is related to let's say it was in that case that stopping the fraud and making the fraud individual. But the second aspect is where our client so they have no evidence of what fraud and this is the case of fraudsters that they website to generate a number. In that case, the topic of fraud, the creating that information, they will choose the amount of information. So we do this is one of the messages of the first was. So that is where a lot of fraud is used requirements and also in certain because we some close to a million messages
So the scale, transfer the scale, you see the ML models being deployed at a scale of 1 billion messages that Twilio is firing on a daily basis to identify fraud. So that's something we need to, so theoretical classes can actually give us this level of exposure, where are these ML models deployed. That is across geographies also, the scale is across geographies. The definition of fraud across geographies also varies, right? Let's say gun, for that matter, gun might be a legalized business in the US, as far as I could understand from movies. I haven't been there, but it's fairly illegal in India as far as I know. Yeah.
Alright, you can sell about it.
Yeah. But surprisingly, I also come from a CRM domain. Spare parts of gun is legal in US, so you can actually have a e-com. We had a client where they built an entire e-com catalog on spare parts of gun. They were not selling us. So you can like buy the pistol, the other part, and then assemble it and let it done. Yeah.
So that is where the ML stack is. Now moving to the identity stack, that's across our entire studio specialization. If you our latest launch that this year introducing it was all about making building the communication infra for not just humans, which was before this year, but now we are building for humans and agents. So we are agents to agents. We are in a state where the other person you're talking to would be how does that change the entire industry?
That's a very interesting perspective. We've actually seen on Instagram, as Deepak sir told, on certain there are these reels. So let's say I call this Eduinx for inquiry that I want to take an admission for a BA product management course. And Eduinx has deployed a voice AI agent of Nari.ai, let's say. And I have also built a voice AI agent talking with my AI agent on an agent. So how does that happen in the end? So who will win that negotiation? And Guru sir is kind of pitching that the course is priced at 1 lakh rupees, and I want it at 80,000 rupees. So who will win this negotiation? So it should come to you, right?
It can happen depending on how you get it. A lot of things still go with the entire category that we discussed. It's not just calling in because previously calls in the need to understand interpreters into it. Right now, if you are really to get the lot of price for and get extract the data from those calls, feed to the outputs, and this from support what are technical when you call you can start from where not having to repeat yourself again and every time you call, the more of the more about me, and more about the process. So that it starts from there, on step. So yeah, these are some of the stages.
Fine. So I'd like to take one round, last round of questions. We'll pass on the mic over here. So across the industries, be it an enterprise like SAP working across all Fortune 500 all major global companies, or a telecommunications APIs company, or enterprise credit, or mobility, fleet management and mobility, etc. What is the optimism in AI? How are you guys looking into the job market? At your scale, let's say your companies hiring more PMs, or what is the signal that you're getting? And also, when you're implementing AI, but where does it go? Is it kind of it is augmenting the actual workforce who are using the product, or it is kind of getting into a kind of a wave kind of a territory completely looking into replacing the driver or what is it? So starting from you, can pass it on, and then we can take that on the
So I think it's good. So if you think about the usage of AI, to augment workforce, that has reduced because every quality workforce has some questions to put on different people. As PMs, we can use AI to identify the products and the product and the point that we can so that has always been there. Now the consumer entirely sales over not, I think that's a very
PM, I'm more forced to look at decision making, more system thinking, how you can get an agent to agent sort of a play, or what Sandeep mentioned, the fundamental guardrails, right? So you're more looking at how do you keep it transparent, where you have predictability, explainability of AI. So that is more an interesting standpoint. Yes, from a hiring, it is a fact. Everybody says you want AI, but finally, whether it is something that you can document is a thing that you can process. But right now, at least I can say that the majority of markets are more towards the side where, let's really bring in more AI data science, because we have to kind of look at a portfolio that drives. So this is the externally it's a little bit different. When you go and sit with any sort of a CIO and you're explaining something, then stop it. Where is AI? Just show me that AI, right? And they are absolutely spellbound. But the moment you cross that layer and go to the end users, you hit a brick wall. They don't like the fact, as long as even if you can prove your trust model, yes. Oh, then it is probabilistic. Of course, it is, right? But it's always going back to that earlier industry era or your electrification era, going into industrialization era, internet era, right? So I think we are also very much in the precipice where, yes, we have new jobs like so-called prompt engineers, which I believe is also a need. But nonetheless, the transition is happening, it is still not yet reached. So there is this friction where you have to go and break it. And in this friction, even at 1%, if trust goes away, you will never get that anymore. That business will absolutely never come back. And that is the challenge that we're trying to address right now. If you look at it from a CIO or a CXO, they want only AI, because even they have to cater to their management. But when you go one level deeper, the way it has to be dealt and sensitized is a little tad different than earlier how we used to do, the so-called product discovery phase or so and so forth.
Great. So, takeaway I would understand, externally, it's trust plays a critical role in enterprise implementation. Yeah, and internally, like strategic work, we are still there. For all the tactical work, cloud subscription does it. Anyone, if you have Airtel public, yeah, on your local, get it on your docker, start it. Yeah. Let's question in your segment of enterprise credit, which is again, you can think of it not as enterprise credit. Even India is one of the biggest stamps of, I think, normal credit. The maid who works at my place, she took a 2 lakhs personal credit at a 15% interest rate. I was surprised, like I would dare to take. Where do you see this credit space, like AI coming into it, loans, this credit assessment becoming easier? At the tap of the internet, you give your PAN card, 20 guys are coming there, getting your credit report, analyzing, giving you loans. So, how does this market evolve for your space, enterprise as well as B2C? Like in terms of jobs, in terms of optimism, everything in this, to this, in that.
Sure. In terms of the market issue, right? So, especially when it comes to such customers, they are quite initial customers. They don't have formal profile, so you have to look at the identity data. So one way new vendors do it is they take the bread of their mouth. So they start off with some basic checks, some identity data checks. Do they have a mobile number that they can actually verify? And yeah, so even if they don't have, they do some basic checks and probably is their KYC goes through without an issue. Are they staying in place when they improve the others? So there is some visibility for collections technology. And then they sort of develop cycle limits and over a period of time build a profile. So they were the proposing government, they take back, and then they keep increasing the limits and then sort of go to plastic and like to that and so on. Those So nowadays, so it's quite giant community, general accounts. So most of everyone have a bank account right now, and Aadhaar and mobile. So all three are verified, and they see some non-security coming in problems, working. So that's a good enough signal. So that's how people see. But of course, there are also examples where things are not best because they did not protect any market in India. And it's good. Even global figures, there are examples where the country because they're good. It's not secure. And they're individual pieces. Innovation. Of course, traditional times, so it's a they have investors and so very large systemic risks that have to take care of and when it comes to what
It's more about optimism. Like, how do you see this AI? So there's this intrinsic fear, right? AI will take over your jobs and all. So you want to have an opinion on how do you see this credit space being evolved with AI? Will it like more loads becoming easier, assessment becoming easier, so process of giving loans become easier, more people becoming employable, more loans getting there. I don't know how does that industry shape up?
so most of the products that we used to provide clients were SaaS product, right? Where they access our APIs or outsource directly to our vendors to streamline the credit process. So one pitch can be to improve operational efficiency. That was maybe 6 weeks. Where everything is put in manually. We could take it from the 2 weeks. So that's one. Necessity doesn't mean that they can lay off like this. The other way to look at it is they can reduce the amount of fraud, the credit cost and reduce because they can catch more false negatives, right? Because invariably human is the non-financial services and other regulated institutions where this is today. Because you can't outsource risk. I mean, they are in business of risk, right? So that way, yeah. So reducing credit costs is the bridge. Having said that, there are different playbooks depending on who's the stakeholder on the other side. So if you're talking to a business officer or the CEO of a bank, then probably you auto-generate the commentary based on all the documents that are showing within seconds. So the demo looks magic, right? So they will be. But the moment you go to an analyst, he will start probing questions in that. Have you operated such a scheme? Have you is there any conflict in some cases? So that's where actually algorithms role and
Typically, AI SaaS logo is always been fancy. Having on-prem product is a little bit messy.
So yeah, so there is hesitation. I would say not more from the point of view of losing their job, but from the point of view of because if they get comfortable that there is a false sense of security, right? Or you are automating it, so you need. So they also want to understand the nitty-gritty how the model performs. But in generative AI, the creativity is by design, not an exception, right? So sort of they want to understand what are the edge cases, where it fails, and so on. So from my point of view, yes, health is criticism, which is I think required
In the industry. Your take on this, you can talk about gig economy. I think your space would be heavily governed by gig. drivers, etc. Now with these predictive tools, ML logics coming in, the Waymo also coming. I don't know what is the penetration of Waymo. Doesn't drive trucks as of now, unfortunately. That's there, and the Teslas are not yet. But whatever. So when you guys are there, so is that helper's job at risk, or does the main driver still have the chotu over there, or because your main logics are taking the role of the chotu and they are getting losing their jobs?
We have very different kind of industry that we operate compared to most of the Europe. And
American trucks don't have the chotu.
it's very interesting because AI is not going to go and pick up this table and deliver it to someone else's house. Drivers are not going to stop driving and carrying those from one place to the other, at least not yet. Sure, future who knows, robotics, robots might do things, autonomous vehicles may get to a point where they things.
Exactly. So yesterday, Andy JC came to India. Amazon Global CEO. We met all with the robotics AI folks in India. So it was on the knowledge.
Yeah, I was, so I was long back, I used to be at CMU, and I was part of the Dalpa team that built the autonomous vehicles back then. This was close to 20 years back. From then to seeing, these autonomous cabs would be like, after Uber is the second most common used cab service in a city like SF. Things have changed a lot, but it's taken a while, right? It's taken 15 years for a passenger vehicle sedan to take away that job. Taking that to a trucking industry is a very, very different ballgame, or a commercial vehicle is a very different ballgame, because we are talking about oil containers driving, hazardous material being moved from one place to the other. The level of risk that you are associated with something taking on an autonomous job is very, very different. So I would say that autonomous vehicles in the commercial vehicle space in the US itself is far. Let alone, we all are aware of how things operate in India. Good luck to, on the Waymo to kind of figure out how to navigate even within Kolkata or Bangalore for that matter. So I'm not as, I am sure there is going to be improvement, there's going to be a lot of innovation that's going to happen in this space, but I don't see a physical economy getting completely obliterated because of AI. I do feel that a lot of off jobs that are like very manual in nature, back office jobs, people are like literally going through multiple Excel sheets, multiple documents, collating stuff, reconciling stuff. A lot of it should become automated. Humans are meant to do a lot more high value work. This was a lot of manual, rigorous work. I do totally anticipate that the services industry is going to be somewhat disrupted, but in a good way. What this is going to be is it's going to be like what manufacturing industry in the 1950s. The industrial revolution changed what a day-to-day skilled or unskilled laborer was doing. The same thing is happening to the tech space today. And I think that's what is going to happen across multiple industries. So AI, AI disruption in the job space is going to be a reality for certain jobs. I don't think it's going to wipe jobs away. It's going to require a different kind of context, right? Like all of us are industry product managers, I believe. PMs, we do a lot of things across the funnel, all the way from doing customer validation to figuring out why you want to do what you want to do. We give it to the execution team, collaborate very closely with the engineering, product, design, data science teams to execute, do analytics, and then release stuff. I think historically, PMs have spent a lot of cycles, or probably equal amount of cycles between validation, execution, and to some degree a very little amount of time on the GTM side of the house. And we were talking about this earlier as well. I think there is a lot of high value activity that a PM can bring to the table by doing deep customer discovery, by doing a lot more on the GTM side of the house, and being extremely rigorous about, hey, this is the goal that we started with, and we hit that goal. If not, why not? I don't need to rely on a third person to come and tell me it's not working. So how do we reorient what are the areas within the product life cycle where we want to add additional time, effort, energy, and the definitive pieces, can be taken up by AI. I think that's how I think of it.
So that's a lovely point. But I would have wanted to end it, but that point kind of invoked me to review one more thing. So now this thing is going on, right? Engineers want to do the business discovery. They are called forward deployed engineers. I see a lot of openings on that. So and then you want the product managers to become full stack builders. You want them to code. So why is this vertical integration that is happening Why is that? The expectation from PMs are getting in a ensuring the adoption of it, whether adoption metrics are clocked or not, whether the actual on-level output metrics are clocked or not, be it revenue, engagement or whatever. So I see a lot of focus on PMs getting into coding, or maybe using non code. But you told a really nice point that you kind of give new definition of full stack builder. That is, don't over-index on the engineering part as a PM. And the PM day-to-day jobs, Deepak already mentioned a cloud subscription or a. So why not get into the GTM part of it? Why isn't there much? I haven't seen much rigor on that. But that's a great point actually. Get it touch more on that and what you do in the across also takes a bit more make on that. So,
I strongly believe that historically, because of the strength that we have as Indians are known to have strong math skills, strong analytical skills, strong execution skills, we naturally orient towards that area, which has globally been a strength for what we bring to the table. But that does not define the PM in my opinion. We are going to see more lean teams, we are going to see more PMs taking on end-to-end ownership of the outcomes rather than just the delivery. I think that's super critical. The other piece that I would strongly recommend every PM to kind of upload is no longer think of product as just a science. There is an art aspect to it, and we often underappreciate what a designer brings to the table, what an artistic viewpoint brings to the table. Like the fact that you can be super creative, the work that a product sells is often that aspect of what is taste, what is nice, what is really going to change the consumer behavior is something we often underestimate. Maybe my last point I'd say is we are reading news about Kunal becoming the CEO of WhatsApp. One of the key reasons that a lot of influence happens because the guy has an exceptional understanding of his consumer psychology, consumer behavior. He's a product manager at heart, but he brings a very different skill to the room. And I think that's what more that we learn, do deeper discovery, really feel the pain of the customer. I think we are all creative enough. We are very great problem solvers. I think we orient where we use our energies. I think it makes us significantly better professionals.
excellent, excellent point. So on that note, that the cloud subscription takes care most of the science part of product management. We need to focus more on the art part of it. Considering this domain requires both the art and science part of it. It's not just about doing the discovery or not just about tracking the matrix or looking at the support tickets and identifying the next feature for the roadmap, but having that taste which makes your product go to the next level, taking care of the GTM and going on to the next level. Definitely, AI is augmenting that is what the table kind of accepts over here across domains. So this note, I'd like to give a thank you to all the esteemed panelists over here. So thanks a lot, folks. Thank you for the time. You all. Thanks. Thank you. So, it's slightly bad. I'm sorry. There should be some audience questions, right? From the students. Yeah. Sorry. So people have come asking me from my so not to want to have the panelists time and ask some questions. Please do that. Please.
Recording the phone. Recording the phone. So later you can add it. Just smile. If you want.
From there, the Aditya.
Happy to listen to it. But since I'm entering the field team, I would like to understand the failure part of the AI also because it involves huge cost. If you notice, most of the startups they have chosen, after their launching the product, that has been a failure. So my question is, how do you handle it? What is your business
So you can also tell the direction. You can also tell the direction. Only tripod, just lose the tripod and.
So how do you handle that failure part?
Next time.
I have a mind at this time. Even before we come into the product, right? I think one of the biggest notions that we also have to break when it comes to AI it is not something that you retrofit everywhere, but more importantly, it is freaking expensive. I think that very understanding of how expensive an AI is, or companies, organizations, CXOs, or whoever are looking at the operational efficiency, saying, oh, I can remove so many teams, highly expensive affair. And if you have not inculcated AI in, like I was mentioning earlier, into the very fabric of how you operate, the amount of value add that it brings will be far less compared to the total usage and finally the commercialization that our companies pay. It is, I think today we have a lot of exposure to it, we use a lot of free tier. Um, if any of you have a cloud subscription, even the one where you pay only $20, um, you know that in probably a few hours you extinguish that if you are building an application. Right? And now if you look at it at enterprise grade and if you want to do white coding, build applications, you brought the concept of FDE, right? Forward deployed engineers. I think somewhere we have to overall take a step back and see what is this useful, right? And when you are now putting it into the product, to bring in AI where it helps. Don't bring in AI just because you are replacing a Google engine, right? These are some conscious decisions that has to be taken. It cannot be that one size sort of a fits all. It has to be generalized to a large extent. And of course, there are failures. It cannot be the case that there are no failures. I can tell you, probably within SAP, I can't regulate because more often than not, we do a lot of garage relevant, solutions which never see the day of
Go back
light.
and see.
But I think one of the key failures towards the first point that I told, Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff came out probably when 8 months in the last year. Oh, I am trenching my entire engineering. I just need 2 people. He trenched them, right? Already probably a month back he came and told it's probably one of the worst decisions. There was one more organization which was a large organization, maybe Ford. Okay, let's wait a few. One more organization, they had given up all of their engineers for AI. They are now bringing them back. This was yesterday's news, right? So, see, one thing is AI is certainly a shiny new thing. Using AI as a tech, as an enabler, as something that brings largely your entire business processes, makes life easy. That is a prerogative of a PM that we have to look into, but not retrofitting it everywhere. I mean, I can give you a very indifferent example, probably we can relate to. My daughter lost her iPad rights. You know why? Because she was using her iPad with ChatGPT for doing her homework. That is education. So these are the kind of things that we ideally have to look into from a product and hopefully make it better. And I believe the onus is on us. With that, I think others might have some.
And also depend on use case. So, for example, one of the most popular ways organizations have started using AI is build RAG pipelines for their knowledge base. So, a lot of internal documents, it's usually tasked with a lot of find a particular policy, which is buried in some server and some step on server. So, you can build a RAG pipeline and sort of so if it fails, you email somebody and get a result. But if it's a critical application like the trucking use case, right? So whether this has left out and the model is not deployed. And in the pivot use case or in the healthcare use case, right? So there is a biomarker which was very off index, but it was not identified. So these are really critical applications, and usually the business application processes are also designed with a lot of checks and balances. It has to follow through into the AI workflow as well. And there are guidelines for non-risk management, which has been revised after the So having thorough events, which is another buzzword, and having your uh, test bench configured with a lot of relevant use cases, having AI safety guardrails would be important in those cases. And noted. Of course, regulation is catching up, but there is a good baseline, and of course, implementing it would be more closer to the technology and they can do much more than what the regulation is. But yeah, the onus is on us to sort of ensure those guidelines.
Hi, viewers. My question is to Bengaluru. So my name is Arpita Raj, Better Research. Hi. As we all see, agentic AI and Gen AI has come and disrupted the market already, right? So I just wanted to understand from your perspective, like down the line, 4 5 years and all, what changes you see in the market in terms of the PM skills? Of course, coding is one sort of aspect you already discussed, but what are the other areas where the PM should cover? Because everywhere we see a lot of job loss and there is a scary situation in the market. So where do you see that and where it will go down the line 4 to 5 years?
Arpita? Yeah, thanks for the question. I think I touched upon this, I want to reinforce what I said. And this is my worldview. I could be wrong 3 years later, but we already starting to see a lot of roles being called builders in a lot of companies. And that's true for Meta, Google, more locally we are talking about Razorcase, talking about it very often. I do anticipate there's going to be a convergence of EPD, product engineering design, in terms of what they do. I don't anticipate they will be replacing one on the other, but I think the same team is going to be able to do a lot more because of just how quickly they're able to turn things around. So I think that's one thing I do anticipate is going to happen. There'll be more builders in companies rather than dedicated PMs, CMs, or designers. That's my take. The other is, as I said, lean means there's an opportunity for product to do more of outcome-driven initiatives. If I'm deciding that I want to build, let's say, uh, an app for parking, it's not just about building a parking app, it's also about how do we ensure that it's going to make X amount of money, it's going to have X amount of adoption, it's going to go about focusing on a particular customer segment and whatnot. I think things that we are often just thinking theoretically, we are able to bring to life in a much shorter time frame. And that's something that I think PMs will be able to do, will be able to experiment, they'll be able to achieve their outcomes far, far quickly. I feel like this is a very similar thing that we saw with what happened in cloud. The likes of AWS and Google allowed a lot of startups to be able to come on board and build cloud-based products. Now I feel this is an opportunity for a lot of PMs, a lot of the why thinkers to be able to build stuff quickly, iterate, come together, do iterations. I think that's my honest opinion.
My two cents to add a layer of topic. Presently, I feel it's the shiny new thing, everybody wants it. Every company has 100 different teams doing a lot of POCs, putting up demos out there, which is looking fabulous, right? Like what a company did not manage to do for 10 years, they are doing it under 6 months. But we are now slowly transitioning from the showcase mode into productization mode. And that is where the fun is. Every aspect of productization has to be taken care, done properly, guardrails, the trust factor, really looking at the longevity of the product. And now we are dealing with AI products. For a PM, you also have to look at additional metrics, right? Like, what about the model failures? How many times you will consider as a failure? How are you doing learning based on the particular data, right? So there are newer ways for PM who is looking at solutioning, system thinking, decision matrices. These are the new things apart from coding. I am still, but now in the sorry, for more as PMs, we have to look at the larger solutioning impact of AI, which is new, which we do not know. Newer matrices that has to be cracked, right? Newer ways of how to kind of really improve those AI systems from a productization, not from a showcase. That is all nice, fancy, but when you really get down, you have to look at it at scale. And this is very much prevalent, at least to the industry that I come from, which is B2B. B2B is quite different, B2C is also that different here. But I think these are some of the avenues for PMs and also largely looking at what might change. Now, can all of this be taken over by AI? We never know. Hopefully we don't see it. Let's see. Yeah. You never know.
One good on this. Hi. My question probably comes from the explanation that you're giving. It's important to figure out where the AI hole is. But when we say, okay, we cannot get into AI beyond this, where does it stop? Because I've had a favorite working in a product organization, now I have a favorite working in a service organization, consulting organization. So there is pressure, there's always pressure from the customers saying that I need AI to be coming into it, where there is no chance as well. So we try to explain this is not an AI goal, but people don't know exactly what thought. So how do we cut this down? Where is the start of this?
There is no one single way how you do it, and it is on a case-to-case basis, right? But having said that, the earlier you put it out there that this is not an AI case, like if you want to take a very, very old legacy process and say, I want to inculcate AI, hopefully my performance will jump, that is never going to happen, right? Making sure that this is understandable to the customer, which is of course the job of us. But in spite of that, we want AI is willing to pay, we take his money. But make sure that he understands that, make sure it is really nailed down that why this will not help, and especially it will never have a long-term benefit. Because if you are not, maybe if you are not on a new stack, it is useless. And that is one of the things that I every day face with my customers. I have customers who are 50-year-old customers. I have ECC, I'm like, okay, I have not seen ECC in SAP. Right now, how can I help you? So it's a case-to-case basis. I think again, if you can consequently engage, this is an exercise I'm doing currently right now with one of a very huge customer of Europe. The CIO wants AI. Business uses thing. The moment they get AI from SAP, all of the issues are solved. Right? They say, oh, I want this information. I say, if you want this information and AI to give it to you, where is your data? It's somewhere. Your AI is only as good as your data. So I think your pitch deck should start, or your, in spite of this, that's why I also made this statement, they want to give you the money, let them. I have one more customer where I'm building a product which he can use Copilot. He doesn't want to. Well, fair enough, thank you. Buy the license. But they understand that it cannot go beyond a certain point. That is where it can go. Case to case, hopefully it helps.
Hello, Ali. So, my question is like, what happens? Suppose we are building some AI model. Okay? So, in between development and some policy changes or business regulatory changes, say some policy changes. Suppose Trump says, my data should be here only, you should not use the data for my, or even some business rules changes, right? So, if some cases, if the entire architecture has to be restructured, so what can we do? And is there any way to predict my model is going to get succeeded? How to predict that success for my model?
This is for me only?
That's for common persons.
Okay. Maybe I'll take an initiative. Earlier when I answered about certain things not going beyond in terms of architecture, this is also something that you bring in. It may have a certain closed-ended workflows, you might not have a right technology stack and things like that. These are already indicators that probably, AI is not your one-stop shop for that solution. Right? Maybe it will maybe there are some intermediate ways where you kind of have your data in a different model, like in SAP, we kind of put it in a vector information in a quicker format is made easy. So these are, again, unfortunately, case-to-case discussions where you can pick, understand what is the rule, but a simple answer to your question is maybe AI was not the right fit to start off with. Right? Maybe you had workflows, maybe you had a rule engine which did its job. Why break it? If it is continuing to do. If you want something else, maybe you have to really look at the larger architecture and reaching the entire solution. And given today's AI age, it might not be as difficult as you think. So give it a thought. Others,
Considering my long-back experience with Deloitte as a consultant, so typically there is this architectural work prior implementing a consulting engagement to look into that. They do a end-to-end process mapping. At that BPMN level itself, it should be identified as Deepak pointed out, whether it's a use case of stochastic rule-based automation, or it needs a workflow engine orchestration, or there are ML use cases, or there are AI use cases. For example, what Akur pointed out was classical like classification, like certain regression models predicting ML in terms of notifications, etc., drivers, etc. What over here brought analytics again ML. Copilot, pure RAG-based architectures and all those things, getting into picture, sophisticated tooling for a heavy amount of data getting consumed, getting parsed and all those things. Over there, in terms of again ML, quantity data and all. So that has to be identified prior, and that is where I think coming from a consulting background and all also a lot of significance how we proactively communicate to that client. That thing. But having said that, this is what is the problem. People wonder every CIO he talks to, he's like, I want AI. So, and then in that situation, how you convince the other side is always difficult. That is taken. But that is what leaders are also working on that too. Like he's getting into that, right? He's getting into the prototyping to productization phase, as he pointed out. The outputs are here, there are McKinsey reports coming out at enterprise-wide implementations. This is the success rate and all. So people are getting into that normal curve back to actual use cases being implemented. It's not like there are actual real use cases that is getting implemented. So we have to be more composed and have to be more structured in our communication. I think that's more important in terms of a consultant or a process analyst. I think Sukumar, you had a question.
Thanks a lot. It's really a good session for a non-techie guy to understand about AI and its evolution. Good, just to take a couple of good products to, showcasing to productization, because that is the key for most of the product application. I belong to a product application, so I will relate to that. I have a couple of questions. Before that, I really want to evolve from myself, how the driverless, I had an experience, definitely it's evolving, right? So, AI also will evolve. My first question, most of us here are from the batch trying to transitioning from a different domain to a PM. Kind of AI kind of without having a PM platform, right? What relevance does domain expertise will help in getting into a new roles or a new job? Most of you guys are from a different domain, you can give your expertise. Because I might not have an expertise in a particular domain, I'm trying to jump in or trying to approach a new role there. So how relevant, how important as an interviewer you will see us, right? That's my point. Secondly, like we're talking about the data layers, right? So data being so critical, it invariably whether it's a telecom or from DFSI or from manufacturing or from the core enterprise organization. So now the data becoming like, whole world is talking about data sovereign, right? Sovereign data, whether it's in the cloud or in here. So how do we have any guardrails? Of course, we provide a guardrail as a service, as a product organization. But however, as a product leaders, how do you see this data to be live? Or what kind of criticality or a kind of mechanism we have to protect those data? Because in fact, I discussed this with Saurabh as well. Probably we would like to hear your perspective in that way. So, two questions.
So just give a brief background. Sukumar is one of the co-host enterprise business head of Red Hat. But in my classes, evening classes over weekends, he is attending the classes from Bay Area or some other places, some enterprise clients. So first of all, I'd like to appreciate what the effort that he puts into learning AI, marketing, needs and all. So unless I can share with you, if he comes up with new concept, changing opinions at his level and all. So I would rather have a more nuanced question on that. Deepak and all the leaders pointing out over here for sure. Does he need to change domain, or he should be like a sales leader augmented with AI? Is that a valuable position he should have? Because you have a lot of experts, I think. This is all again learning AI. So how do you see that as even though you're from product leaders, day in and day out of product management job, we talk with customer success folks, GTM folks, product marketing folks, etc. Right? SAP is a far more complex process to release a feature about and pay to of course. So how do you think? Would you think an AI augmented cross-functional leader adds a lot more value, or they should get into the AI domain or what? Sort of.
So I'll take this because I moved to product from sales. Right? So I used to do sales for vendor services. So first thing that I mean, earlier, now it's changed. Earlier it was called empathy. Right? So that's one thing that you need empathy to the user, understanding his problem. So when I was doing these sales, I used to fall in love with the problem, not with the solution. So it was very, I used to hold my opinions on the solution very loosely. So then I thought, okay, probably sales is not the right road for me, and then into product. So it depends. I think different motivations. If you're in sales versus product, if you're truly motivated by the problem, right? And so that way, so if you love the problem more than the product and closing deals, probably product is the right solution. And for product, the skills or the psyche a person to have is one is empathy, right? And being in sales gives you that advantage. So you're in front of a client every day in and day out, and pure play product managers are actually that's one of their complaints in that they don't get a lot of customer face time. So probably that's your advantage. So you understand the problem more intimately. And second is so if you have to decompose space, it is one is empathy, the other is critical thinking. Are you able to sort of look at a given problem, break it down into constituent parts, and sort of figure out what is the best solution and have an experimentation mindset, right? So in sales, it's all about I have the solution, I need to sort of close and increase my quota, right? Close the quota. But in product management, it's always we have a solution, this is but there are and coming to your other question on data, especially in banks, right? So there is one actually getting that you can apply if you want to dissuade customers from using data also. They may be very impressed by all this fraud ChatGPT that they use, but the moment they try and look at their own enterprise data to be appropriate, their own infosec team would sort of be a bottleneck. So here there are a lot of ways you can go. Of course, you can use that those APIs that you are able to the other way is you always don't need an opus 2.8 for most of the use cases. If it is any document, you can probably use Gemma or when hosting your local, and there are several ones that can sort of run on edge devices also. And a lot of enterprises do that. So, and the good thing is most of these models are open made. You can fine tune small footprint model like work perform the state of the art formulation for your use. Especially to enterprise.
When customer feedback companies longer, so product leaders, how can you speak the microphone closer? So when the customer's feedback context for companies long-term vision, so how can you decide that and in which direction do we need to go in such cases?
If you understood the question, if there are feedbacks on the company's long-term vision.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there is a conflict, like your long-term vision is in some other direction and the conflicts are in some other direction. So how would you go?
Okay. So I think it's a classical case. You have certain feedbacks from customers where there are certain expectations which is not in line with whatever you have in the roadmap or something. And how do you handle those kind of a situation? Yeah, those anyone appearing in an interview.
So I think this happens pretty often in day-to-day life for a product manager, especially in startups, because startups when you are starting off, you are building whatever you can to get your first set of customers. So you get to 1 million, then you get to 10 million, and at 10 million, you are at this point where so far you said yes to every single customer to bring them on board, and now you are at a point where hey, I cannot meaningfully go deep in any particular segment of customers to get to the 50 or 100 million. And very often, what I've seen founders that I've had the fortune of working with is they've had to take a strong stance of saying no to a particular segment. And that no has, again, a bit what the competitive landscape is, what is your unique mode that you are bringing to the table. And at that point, you are almost having a weighted sense that, hey, you know what, if I go after this particular customer segment and this size of industry, I have a higher likelihood of success and a better chance of getting to 100 million. Let me go there rather than taking something else. I think that happens at a strategy level, but then that happens also at a day-to-day level. Once the strategy is clear, that I as a business do not want to focus on consumers, I only want to focus on businesses. If someone comes in and says that I want to offer a consumer, I'm interested in consumer specific feature, no matter how big of a business you are, I will be upfront and say that you know what, this doesn't work in my long-term strategy, and I'll say no. I think this happens very often. I've seen large businesses do that. That's what you have to say no. That's definitely. Thank you.
You definitely have a very contradictory point of view from deeper. Like a big enterprise client comes into the picture, multi-billion dollar attendance scale, and they want to change an SAP success factor, they want certain configuration on the ATS, they want it to be built, or else the deal goes, let's take out them. So, because what do? You will prioritize your roadmap, your semester roadmap, or you will touch on to the customer requirement.
Depends on the money on the table. Finally, but actually, this is something that I'm also currently fighting with one of the customers, and they want us to do ABC, but a few of them are also quite tangential in product, and it also has a little bit of an overlap with some of the solutions in a different LOB. Right? So, this is like Uncle mentioned, this is fairly quite common on a day-to-day thing for a PM. You can look at it as two things. One, yes, you say no, absolutely, and certain times that is the best way possible. Also, because not to just say, okay, we will try, because the moment you kind of go and there's no coming back, right? You could also look at it as an opportunity in a way where it could be a white space that you open, where you have a partner work with your stack, so that you still grab some of the time that Uncle was mentioning, so you still get that money. And that is also a play that we use, especially in SAP, so that we still keep largely the overarching architecture, the usage of whatever platform is SAP, because then we continue to kind of make money. But then we also provide a solution for that customer in a little different way. Last but not the least, of course, we have a house consulting organization which also does a bespoke sort of a, architecture and feature-driven solution for the customer. That is where we have a lot more money. So it again depends to really bring the customer to say we can't, or we want to partner with, a little less expensive, maybe still a generic solution. We take our own consulting way, little more expensive, but what we choice. The choice is more for the customer. This is something that we do, but again, customers say no. Currently, the customers that are working, we are planning to move them from 2 million to 8 million. And here we are now forced to nod on a few things. So again, like I said, towards my first statement, maybe our money also talks sometimes. So it's a calculated risk for the viewer.
To add to that, the company's vision also matters. So sometimes we see customers who come and say that, hey, your competitor is providing this, why are you not providing that? Maybe that's our difference that we have.
But increase like aperture light.
We don't want to play game where we provide all every each aspect of the product, but we want to be specialized in certain aspects and do it. So it's very much in line to your vision, and if that happens, I think you again have to go back and say, I have no in this.
So there's this domain called customer success, who are in charge of custodians of retention and enterprise segment. Companies like SAP and B2B big players, they invest a lot in that. They are magicians. Even if a customer comes from all of a sudden, so there might be someone comes up with a new request, that's a situation of but that's more of a situation of a retention. They're already a 2 million client, you want to make it an 8 million client. The retention kind of is sticking on this new capabilities as well. Product manager. So service now kind of heavily invested to building outbound product managers. So what they do is there is a custodian of the feature roadmap, internal to the feedbacks, your priorities, adoption goals, org level goals. Then there is an outbound product manager which also works with the same engineering team, but his entire focus is just with the outside customers. He's just sitting with the customer success team and sales team, and someone like a Sukumar who is enterprise business head, he tells, I want this, I want for cracking this 15 million client, and someone kind of a customer success team tells, I want a 2 million to 8 million retention is dependent on this. That guy kind of prioritizes his entire roadmap basis the dollar value and comes back to the table and fights with this inbound product manager. In a fight in a healthy sense, but always for the customer. Yeah. but always a kind of a healthy fight happens, which wins. Like or you have a priority or an outbound product manager. So that a lot of equations come into enterprise segment, and then you finally come with that golden protocol. I think that's about it. Or can we take one final question, or any last question? Yeah, sure.
I originally had two questions, like for in the interest of the project at the company. I was curious, rather intrigued about your fraud detection, your AI fraud detection. So what I would like to know is, how do you measure your success rate in fraud detection? Is it purely the prevention of fraud, or do you also optimize it for the false positives and customer experience?
The model itself, so as it was mentioned earlier, you have conversion metrics, you have metrics like AURC, AU under the index, and which are the equations of each other. And it's always a trade-off between false positives and false negatives, depending on how quickly that particular application is. In some cases, you might be okay accepting more false negatives, right? But yeah, if you are more conservative, then you can throw type 2 errors. But yeah, in the fraud, it's most likely type 2 errors. Yeah.
common example in
We should
vaccine
have
treatment,
that
right? Let's say
We should
you're
have
going
that
to a
also.
doctor and you're anticipating that you will be diagnosed with a disease. God forbid it doesn't happen.
Mic on, but
Okay, so the doctor can
mic is
say,
off
let's say
still.
what's actual. You might not have a disease, or you might have a disease. Let's say, let's keep it simple, malaria. I think more or less curable, right? So you can have malaria, you cannot have malaria. The doctor can also say two things. You do have malaria or you don't have malaria. That is what we're trying to explain, which is a type 1 error and a type 2 error. So that is where you kind of identify. If at all you don't have malaria and he says you have malaria, that's fine. After 2-3 days, we'll find out that you don't have malaria. But you have malaria and the doctor says you don't have malaria, that's problematic. Because for 2-3 days, you are partying at Coromangala, you are losing out all the fluids and you're all getting dehydrated when you wanted all the water, right? So you get that. That is what is very critical in fraud detection. That is what you are responding to.
But once the model goes into production, then it's all about what's the economic value to you, right? So you add some credit
Why not
costs,
showing the red bar?
credit losses prior to the model going live. And once the model went live, you analyze the cohorts to see whether there is any risk or gain in the process. And also, it's also important to sort of do model monitoring, right? Because there is a database that happens, and there may be certain events that may spike certain signals, and your model may not perform. Say for example, during COVID, right? Suddenly all business revenues went low, but yeah, and we can't sort of reject loans for everyone. Uh, so you have to sort of monitor that over a period of time, over the data kind of which one is frauds, especially in case of fraud and weakness. But yeah, in case of, say for example, probably you might don't want to put something to chemotherapy because of the false positive. It's depending on the user.
The fraudulent models on coming.
So I have a degree point. I think what you say, somebody has been saying that you don't have that is no problem. That's a very